When you think about a traditional American love song, especially the ones churning out of Tin Pan Alley in the early 20th century, there's a very specific, almost rigidly enforced vocabulary, you know?
Oh, absolutely. It's all very ethereal.
Right. You have your stars, your moons, your gentle breezes, the sudden acceleration of a heartbeat.
Right. The lyricists back then basically built their entire careers on those floating romantic abstractions.
Exactly. But then you encounter a lyricist who decides that, well, rather than gazing up at the celestial bodies to explain human desire, he's going to look at the digestive tract.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. He decides that the mechanics of the human body, like the cold, hard, unromantic biological plumbing, can be weaponized to tell a much more devastating story about why we fail to connect.
And it completely shatters the illusion of the sentimental romance. I mean, when you strip away the poetry of a starry night and replace it with clinical, polysyllabic medical terminology, you're not just making a joke.
No, not at all.
You're actively forcing the audience to confront the grotesque reality of physical existence. And more importantly, the chilling possibility that you can know absolutely everything about a person's mechanics and still not know them at all.
Wow. Yeah, that tension right there between the sterile encyclopedic precision of science and the absolute messy chaos of emotional intimacy that is our entire landscape for today.
It's a fantastic landscape.
It really is. So welcome back, everyone, to episode 64 of Porter-Pedia, our ongoing exploration of the world, the work, and the incredibly complex life of the legendary Cole Porter.
It's great to be back.
Now, for those of you who've been traveling alongside us, you'll recall our recent explorations into the brilliant rapid-fire references in his songs Farming and They Couldn't Compare to You.
Right. We spent a lot of time on those.
We did. We really dissected the mechanics of the classic Porterless song, tracking how he name-dropped cultural touchstones, socialites, global brands, all to weave these vivid, satirical tapestries of high society.
And those previous explorations really laid essential groundwork. I mean, understanding how Porter utilized the external world, the society pages, the gossip columns, the European luxury destinations. It gives us a baseline for his structural genius.
Totally.
Because what we are looking at today is a radical subversion of his own established formula.
Yeah, it's a complete flip. And we have so many more list songs coming up in future installments, so I highly encourage you to go back and check out those past episodes if you haven't yet. They're just the perfect warm-up.
Definitely.
And I have to mention, as we get deeper into this catalog, the sheer volume of historical and cultural breadcrumbs Porter left behind is staggering. It's just endless.
It really is a bottomless well.
So if you are the kind of listener who thrives on tracing every single one of those breadcrumbs, you absolutely must pick up the book, Porter-Pedia.
Oh, without a doubt. It's essential.
It is the definitive companion to this series. It comprehensively explains over 2,600 specific references Porter dropped throughout his career. 2,600.
It's just an unbelievable resource.
The link is right there in the episode description. Having that encyclopedia at your fingertips totally transforms how you experience this music.
It provides the architectural blueprint of his entire creative output, really. You simply can't grasp the full weight of his lyrical choices without understanding the very specific 1930s cultural lexicon he was pulling from.
Right. Which brings us to our mission at hand today. We are focusing entirely on a single piece of that architecture. We are exploring the references dropped in another Porter list song, this time the 1933 song, The Physician.
Ah, yes. Written for the transatlantic stage production Nymph Errant.
Exactly. And, you know, if you just glance at the lyrics or hear the melody floating in the background, it masquerades as this quirky, syncopated novelty number about anatomy.
Right. It sounds very light on the surface.
But we're going to unpack how this song actually operates as a wry, urbane, and quietly tragic meditation on emotional distance.
It's so much deeper than it first appears.
It really is. And before we go any further, I want to note that there is a link in the episode description to a performance of The Physician. You absolutely must hear it. It's just amazing.
Oh, the performance is crucial.
The way the performer navigates the percussive, jagged consonants of all that medical jargon against the swinging rhythm of the music, it is a total masterclass in vocal delivery.
Yeah, because the musicology is inseparable from the comedy here. The rhythm itself emphasizes the clinical coldness of the words.
Okay, so let's establish the narrative framework first. Because we aren't just getting a random list of organs out of nowhere, right?
Right, there's a very specific setting.
Exactly. We are dropping into a highly specific dynamic. The narrator of the song is a young woman who has fallen completely under the spell of what she calls a shattering physician.
What a phrase.
I know. She notes that he is quite the best-looking doctor in the state, and she provides this fascinating visual detail. She says when she gazes up at him, he looks less like a doctor than a Turk.
And, the word choice there is doing incredible heavy lifting.
How so?
Well, calling him shattering immediately establishes a massive power imbalance. She is devastated by him. She's undone by his mere presence.
Right, she's completely vulnerable.
Exactly. And the comparison to a Turk taps directly into the Orientalism and exoticism that was so prevalent in 1920s and 30s popular culture.
Oh, like Rudolph Valentino.
Yes, exactly. Think of Valentino in The Chic. Porter is deliberately pulling this man out of the sterile, fluorescent-lit environment of a medical clinic and cloaking him in an aura of overwhelming, almost dangerous romantic allure.
But the entire conflict hinges on a single brilliant question she asks in that opening verse. She sings, "I was tempted to whisper, do you love me or do you merely love your work?"
It is such a modern dilemma.
Isn't it? It reminds me of dating someone whose professional ambition totally eclipses their personal life. Like imagine bringing a brilliant, highly successful structural engineer to a romantic, candlelit dinner at your apartment.
Okay, I can picture this.
You're trying to set a mood, you're trying to foster some intimacy, and they spend the entire evening obsessively complimenting the load-bearing capacity of your ceiling joists.
That is painfully accurate.
Right. They are engaged, they are passionate, but their passion is entirely misdirected.
That analogy perfectly captures the frustration here. You are desperate to be perceived as a whole, breathing, emotional entity, and you are being reduced to a fascinating schematic.
Yes.
And this brings us to the massive structural shift Porter executes here. As we established with farming, his typical list song operates as an open system. It's constantly pulling in external social references.
Right, checking the society pages.
Exactly. But with the physician, he creates a closed system. The boundaries of the song's universe shrink until they encompass nothing but the narrator's physical form.
So by turning the lens entirely inward, he creates a totally different comedic engine. But does that shift just serve to make the joke more accessible? Or is there a sharper satirical edge to trapping the listener inside this anatomical closed system?
I'd argue it achieves both simultaneously. First, it completely democratizes the humor. You don't need to know the latest gossip from the French Riviera to understand the joke because everyone possesses the biology being discussed.
Right. We all have an esophagus.
Exactly. But the sharper satire lies in how this closed system turns the doctor into a caricature of modern expertise. In the 1930s, the medical specialist was increasingly viewed as an infallible, godlike figure. Porter takes that societal reverence for scientific specialization and pushes it to its absurd extreme. He presents a man so highly educated, so specialized, that he has entirely lost the capacity for basic human empathy.
So the examination begins, and Porter launches into this relentless catalog. He mirrors a real physical exam, starting with respiratory romance and the musicality of medicine.
Which is such a bizarre place for a love song to start.
It really is. The doctor tells her that her bronchial tubes are entrancing. Her epiglottis fills him with glee. And then we hit the larynx and pharynx. He simply loved the larynx and went wild about the pharynx.
Now, notice the clash between the phonetic reality of those words and the adjectives attached to them.
Oh, right.
Larynx and pharynx are incredibly harsh, percussive words. They require the singer to hit hard consonants and awkward guttural vowels.
Yeah, they're kind of ugly words.
They are the exact antithesis of the smooth legato phrasing you expect in a romantic ballad.
I was actually looking at that exact rhyme. It's a flawless internal rhyme, but it feels like Porter is almost daring the singer to make it sound lyrical.
Yeah, it really is.
The comedy isn't just that a doctor is looking at a throat passage. The comedy is the phonetic violence of the word pharynx, colliding with the hyperbolic phrase "went wild." It forces the listener to realize how inherently unsexy the interior of the human body actually is.
Precisely. Porter is weaponizing the clinical vocabulary to highlight the absurdity of the doctor's reaction. I mean, a normal human being might go wild over a smile or a glance or a silhouette. This physician is experiencing genuine, euphoric, romantic arousal over the cartilaginous structure that houses the vocal cords. The misalignment is so jarring, and that friction is what generates the comedy.
And that misalignment only escalates as the examination moves downward and inward. We transition from the mechanics of breathing to the far more systemic and arguably far less glamorous processes of digestion and bodily maintenance.
And the language of flirtation becomes completely surreal here.
It really does. He said my epidermis was darling. He went through wild ecstatics when I showed him my lymphatics.
The theatricality of that specific lyric is just brilliant.
Lymphatics?
Yeah, the immune system is an entirely internal microscopic network of vessels and nodes. The idea of showing someone your lymphatics implies the physical posturing of a burlesque dancer revealing an ankle or a thigh.
Oh, wow.
But he's applying it to an invisible, toxin-filtering biological process.
It's grotesque when you really visualize it.
It really is.
And it continues. He is ravished by her esophagus. And then we hit this masterstroke of Latinate pomposity. He said 'twas just enormous, my appendix vermiformis.
Oh, yes.
We all know the appendix is functionally useless, right? It's a vestigial dead end. So why does Porter use the full archaic Latin nomenclature here?
Because the Latin elevates the absurdity through faux grandeur. It emphasizes the physician's academic pretension. He isn't just looking at her organs, he is cataloging them with the rigid taxonomic formality of a 19th century biologist.
Oh, what makes sense?
Calling a useless tiny organ enormous while using its grandest possible scientific name perfectly encapsulates a man who values data over function and vocabulary over connection.
Which brings us to the lyric that absolutely stopped me in my tracks. It is so jarring, even by modern standards. She sings, he said of all his sweeties, I'd the sweetest diabetes.
Yeah, that one hits hard.
To take a chronic systemic illness, one that, especially in the early 1930s, was a very grim reality, despite the relatively recent discovery of insulin, and to spin it into a romantic compliment using a pun on the word sweet.
It's incredibly dark.
That is an incredibly dark comedic leaf.
It is arguably the most subversive line in the entire song. Porter is actively violating the unwritten rules of theatrical escapism. Broadway audiences in 1933 were seeking refuge from the miseries of the Great Depression. They wanted glamour and lightness.
Right, they wanted to escape.
Injecting a chronic metabolic disease into a supposedly lighthearted Liszt song is a deliberate provocation.
Do you think audiences in 1933 gasped at that, or were they attuned to Porter's specific brand of morbidity?
Well, Porter's core audience, the sophisticated urban theatergoers, they expected him to push the envelope. This line demonstrates his refusal to separate the high glamour of romance from the inevitable decay of the human body. He is reminding the audience that beneath the silk dresses and tailored tuxedos, we are all just fragile, failing biological machines. The pun on sweet is brilliant, but the underlying reminder of mortality is what makes the joke linger.
It definitely lingers. But Porter isn't just playing with internal pathology. He moves on to the structural foundation of the body. And this is where he pulls off a magnificent piece of theatrical misdirection.
Oh, this part is ingenious.
He uses the skeletal system to slip overtly sexual imagery right past the censors.
You have to remember, Nymph Errant premiered in London. That meant every single lyric had to pass through the Lord Chamberlain's office.
Right, and they were notoriously strict.
There, they strictly censored stage productions for obscenity or indecency. You couldn't sing explicitly about hips or laps or sexual contact.
But you can sing about a pelvic girdle.
Exactly.
A lyric goes, he did a double hurdle when I shook my pelvic girdle. Now, if you strip away the medical jargon, she is shimmying. She's performing a highly suggestive physical dance right in front of him.
Right.
But because Porter uses the anatomical term for the bony basin of the lower torso, it just sounds like an orthopedic evaluation.
It is the ultimate cloaked innuendo. The clinical terminology acts as a linguistic shield. And he pulls the exact same trick with the patella. He murmured molto bella when I sat on his patella.
She is sitting on his lap.
Yes.
She has physically placed herself on top of him. It's an incredibly intimate, tactile moment. But by identifying the point of contact purely as the kneecap, the patella, he drains the romance completely out of the physical contact.
He sterilizes it.
Actually reminds me of that modern phenomenon of algorithmic censorship on social media.
Oh, how so?
You know, people invent algo-speak to bypass content filters. They use sterile or bizarre substitute words to discuss taboo subjects so their videos don't get taken down.
Oh, right, like using unalive instead of...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Porter was doing the 1930s equivalent of that. He was using Grey's Anatomy to bypass the morality police.
That is a brilliant comparison. And in doing so, he underscores the central tragedy of the narrator. She is initiating physical contact, she's shaking her hips, she is sitting on his lap. The physical proximity is achieved.
But he's missing it entirely.
Completely. The doctor's mind remains trapped in the textbook. He is registering her actions not as romantic invitations, but as fascinating kinetic movements of the skeletal structure.
He even elevates the coccyx, the tailbone, to a point of intense fascination.
Mm.
And then the climax of this verse, which is just delightfully bizarre. He cried, "May heaven strike us when I played my umbilicus."
Playing the navel.
Right. It's this strange, almost infantile imagery mixed with adult implication. It just highlights how utterly disconnected his reactions are from the reality of the woman right in front of him.
And this disconnection is further amplified by his linguistic choices, because Porter layers on an entirely different kind of pretension to round out the character of the physician.
Yes, the polyglot physician. As if the Latin and the medical jargon weren't alienating enough, the doctor murmurs his appreciations in a variety of European languages.
Showing off his education.
Exactly. When she sits on his patella, he says, "Molto bella," Italian for very beautiful. He examines her vertebrae and calls them sehr schöne, German for very beautiful. He inspects her tailbone and declares it plus que gentil, French for more than kind.
And these multilingual asides are critical for placing the song in its specific historical milieu. This is a direct commentary on the American expatriate culture of the 1920s and 30s.
Ah, the hangover of the lost generation.
Exactly. The American upper class, and certainly Porter's own social circle, placed immense value on European sophistication.
Right.
Sprinkling your conversation with French or Italian was a massive social signifier. It proved you had traveled, that you were cultured, that you possessed a refined, cosmopolitan palate.
But here, the application of that cosmopolitan refinement is a complete joke. I mean, he's using the language of Dante and Goethe to complement a spinal column.
It's absurd.
It makes him seem less like a sophisticated man of the world and more like a pretentious idiot who is completely lacking in contextual awareness.
That is the crux of the character. He has amassed an immense reservoir of data. He knows multiple languages. He has mastered complex medical science. He knows the Latin root of every organ in her body. But he possesses zero emotional fluency.
Wow. Think about the tragic irony of that. He has access to literally thousands of words across multiple languages, yet he cannot string together the three simple English words she is desperately waiting to hear.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the emotional anchor of the song. The laughter sort of dies down, and Porter hits us with the core misalignment.
This is where the song transcends novelty and becomes a really poignant critique of human fragmentation.
Every verse of escalating absurdity is grounded by the same recurring melancholy refrain.
But he never said he loved me.
It's so sad.
It is. And then we reach the bridge, which drops the comedy entirely. She sings, "I kept on racking my soul to figure out why he loved every part of me, and yet not me as a whole. Not me as a whole." That single line is the thesis of the entire piece.
It really hits you.
It does. The physician is a master of parts. He can evaluate, categorize, and admire the individual components of her physical form, but he is completely incapable of synthesizing those parts into a recognizable human soul.
The scientific language we've been laughing at for 3 minutes suddenly reveals itself as a metaphor for his profound emotional distance.
Yes.
Like the stethoscope is a barrier. It creates the illusion of intimacy. He's listening to her heartbeat, after all, but he isn't hearing her.
It forces the listener to differentiate between intense admiration and actual love.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor is deeply, genuinely fascinated by her. He goes into ecstatics, as the song says, but admiration does not require vulnerability.
Right.
Love requires stepping out from behind the safety of expertise and engaging with the unpredictable, messy reality of another complete person. And the doctor is just too comfortable in his role as the detached observer to ever take that risk.
And the narrative climax of the song proves that he will never take that risk. In the final verse, she tries to force the issue. She induces him to go for a walk in the park.
A classic romantic setting.
Exactly. She pushes him to talk about the things she wants most, and they linger together until the morning.
Now, the implication of spending the entire night together in the park is, especially for 1933 theater, a clear indicator of a consummated physical encounter. They have reached the absolute zenith of physical intimacy.
You would assume that this finally breaks the spell, that the clinical distance has finally collapsed. But when morning breaks, the reality of their dynamic reasserts itself in the most devastating way possible.
It's brutal.
Because he is still technically her physician,
Yep.
She attempts to pay him his medical fee for the quote-unquote examination. His response is to say, "Wait, don't be funny. It is I who owe you money."
It is a breathtakingly cynical conclusion. Even after sharing the most profound physical intimacy possible, he immediately reverts to a transactional mindset.
He commodifies the night. By insisting he owes her money, he reduces their time together to an exchange of services.
Exactly.
It totally obliterates any lingering hope of romantic vulnerability. The encounter wasn't an act of love, it was an extended consultation. And the song closes with that final, brutal reiteration. But he never said he loved me.
The comedy evaporates, leaving the narrator in a state of profound emotional isolation. And to fully grasp why Porter ended the song on such a bleak note, we really have to look at the broader context of the show it belonged to.
Right, nympharent. Let's talk about that, because Romney Brent's libretto and the original novel by James Laver were incredibly progressive and quite controversial for the time.
Very much so. The protagonist of Nymph Errant, Evangeline Edwards, leaves a Swiss finishing school and decides to experience the world before settling down.
A very modern premise.
Exactly. She embarks on this sprawling journey across Europe, encountering various men, a French theater producer, a Russian violinist, an Austrian count. The narrative is essentially a satirical exploration of modern womanhood and the massive gulf between the fairy tale romances women were conditioned to expect and the deeply flawed transactional reality of dealing with actual men.
So the physician fits seamlessly into that thesis. The doctor is just another archetype of male inadequacy.
Exactly.
He has status, he has immense intelligence, he has devastating good looks, but he is fundamentally broken when it comes to human connection. And this reflects a massive cultural contradiction occurring in the 1930s.
Spot on. On one hand, you have the devastating reality of the Great Depression. The economic collapse forced a very grim, pragmatic view of the world upon millions of people. But running parallel to that was the golden age of theater and cinema, which provided an insatiable demand for high society escapism.
And crucially, this was an era that was practically deifying modern science. Medical advancements were accelerating, and the specialist was replacing the old-fashioned family doctor.
Right, the era of the expert.
Society was placing its faith in data, in precision, in measurable expertise. Porter is subtly mocking that societal shift. He is arguing that scientific mastery does not equate to emotional intelligence.
The song also captures a transitional moment in sexual politics. The fact that a woman could stand on stage and frankly itemize her anatomy, even masked in comedy, showed a significant loosening of Victorian morality.
Yeah, that was a big step.
Yet her core desire, the yearning for a monogamous, committed declaration of love, remains deeply traditional. She has modern freedom, but she is trapped by an age-old longing.
Which brings us to the man who wrote the words. If any artist understood the tension between dazzling surface-level perfection and profound internal isolation, it was Cole Porter.
He was the absolute embodiment of paradox.
He really was. He was born into immense wealth in Indiana, yet his letters reveal a man constantly gripped by financial anxiety. He was the ultimate socialite, orchestrating these legendary opulent parties in Paris and Venice, surrounded by the brightest stars of the era. But those who knew him well often described him as deeply guarded, highly sensitive, and ultimately quite isolated.
He lived his life entirely in the public eye, yet he remained an enigma even to his closest friends. He could navigate the gritty, high-stakes negotiations of Broadway producing in the morning and seamlessly transition to holding court with European aristocracy in the evening.
And his creative process mirrors the obsessive detail of the physician in the song. Porter was notoriously meticulous.
It didn't just stumble upon the rhyme of ecstatics and lymphatics.
No, not at all. He agonized over syllables, over meter, over the precise placement of a vowel to ensure the joke landed with maximum acoustic impact. The physician is a reflection of his own duality.
It really is.
It is wrapped in the sparkling, infectious packaging of musical comedy, but at its core, it is a surgical dissection of the loneliness inherent in the human condition.
He proves that you can master the vocabulary of the world, whether it's the language of high society or the terminology of a medical textbook, and still find yourself utterly unable to connect with the person standing right in front of you.
It is a masterpiece of misalignment. From the bronchial tubes to the pelvic girdle, from the pretentious European murmurs to the devastating financial transaction in the park, Porter used the cold, unyielding language of medicine to expose the quietly aching heart hidden beneath the laughter.
Beautifully said.
He shows us that admiring the parts will never substitute for loving the whole.
And as we conclude our analysis of this brilliant 1933 time capsule, I think there is a really profound parallel to be drawn with our present moment.
So.
Think about our modern, hyper-digitized landscape. We live in an era that is completely obsessed with data collection.
Oh, for sure.
We track our heart rates and REM sleep cycles on our wrists. We sequence our DNA to uncover our exact genetic lineage. And when it comes to romance, dating apps encourage us to categorize ourselves and our potential partners into highly specific, searchable traits.
Right. Exact height, political affiliation, Myers-Briggs personality types.
Exactly. Specific dietary habits. We are basically compiling dossiers.
Wow. We've become our own physicians. We are generating massive diagnostic charts for our dating profiles.
Precisely. We have more granular data about the quote-unquote parts of a person than any generation in human history.
Yeah.
But are we at risk of falling into the same trap as the narrator's doctor? By filtering our romantic prospects through a checklist of highly specific metrics, are we losing the ability to simply sit across from someone and embrace them as a whole, unpredictable, unquantifiable human being?
That's a chilling thought.
Because data is not chemistry, and categorization is not love.
That is a phenomenal question to leave hanging in the air. We possess infinite data, but are we sacrificing our emotional fluency to get it? I will be thinking about that for a long time. Thank you for that incredible synthesis.
It is my pleasure.
And thank you, the listener, for dedicating your time to explore the architecture of this music with us today. Before we officially sign off, please remember to click the link in the episode description to watch that stellar performance of The Physician.
You really have to see it.
Having unpacked the layers of censorship dodging, the phonetic brilliance, and the underlying tragedy, you will hear every single syllable in a completely new light.
And of course, ensure you secure your copy of Porter-Pedia. It is the vital key to unlocking the thousands of other intricate, hilarious, and deeply moving puzzles that Cole Porter left for us.
Keep questioning the art you consume, keep exploring the history behind the lyrics, and keep learning. And the next time someone compliments your epiglottis, maybe ask them if they actually know who you are. We'll see you next time.